Hey guys, I've seen a lot of people picking up the game and Steam is having their winter sale right now, so I figured I would make this video. There's a lot of mistakes that people will continuously make even after they've sunk hundreds of hours into the game, so I figured I would try to fix that. I'm going to go over mistakes and generally useful information for multiplayer in this guide. Your goal should be to try to make things as frictionless as possible, be that by creating openings or by just knowing how to not disrupt other people. If you haven't watched a guide on how to play your weapon, you should go do that at some point as well. To not waste our time, I go kind of fast, so comment questions if you have any. Some weapons will knock down or launch people depending on the attack you hit your teammates with. These attacks will not be mitigated by flinch-free 1. Here are all the attacks that are the most common to launch other players. Do keep in mind if you do get launched and the monster is not toppled, you can do an attack in the air, which can result in a mount. The only way to not get launched is to be wearing a rocksteady mantle or to just not get hit by it. Other weapons, instead of launching players, will knock them over, like the heavy bowgun and gun lance wyvern fire. Heavy bowgun will also do this with cluster 2 and 3 bombs, so stay away from those in multiplayer. Now that's not all of it, because there's another level of knockback called trips. Trips are one level above flinching and are induced by some weapon attacks. Here are all of the most common ones. You can mitigate this by equipping flinch-free 3, but you really should only have to go into hunts with flinch-free 1. If someone gets stunned, you can hit them to get them out of it, but it's not always needed. If the monster's toppled, for example, I would just hit the monster because instead of losing both you and your teammate's DPS, you just lose your teammate's DPS. But if the monster is not toppled and they're quite close to your teammate, I would hit them out of the stun if you're close enough. You could also throw a Dust of Life to at least increase their health, so they probably won't cart. If someone gets paralyzed, however, you have to use an attack that will either throw or knock over your teammate. You can use the Street Fighter emote to do this as well. If another player gets procced by sleep, you'll see them stumbling around. If you do see them doing this, just hit them and they'll be fine. If you get procced by sleep and don't have an energy drink, just try to walk towards a teammate. One of the most divided topics regarding multiplayer is probably positioning. Some people believe that all cutting weapons should only attack the tail, and all blunt weapons should have priority on the head. And other people believe that it doesn't really matter, and whoever can just go on the head. I'm somewhere in the middle, where I believe that it makes sense for low and high rank to have blunt weapons taking priority on the head because it's harder to get flinch free, but in master rank I believe that you should just always have flinch free and it's okay for everyone to just go on the head. It's a really easy skill to slot and should probably just be a mandatory skill for multiplayer, especially in master rank. I would say anyone with flinch-free would arguably take priority at the head over anyone else. If you are using blunt and you want the tail cut, then you can subtly suggest to your teammates that they should cut the tail by tenderizing it. This will usually result in at least a couple of them going to the tail. Probably one of the weirdest things I see is people placing bombs randomly during hunts. This is terrible for a multitude of reasons. First off, if you've ever been to the training arena, you'd probably know that bombs knock you down. The negative effects of this is multiplied by every member in your squad that gets knocked over by the bombs that you plant. And doing this when a monster is toppled is especially stupid because then everybody loses out on DPS instead of just one or two of you. If you look at the amount of DPS that just you could do in the time it takes to plant and detonate the bombs, it's probably greater than the bombs, so it just doesn't make any sense to use them usually. One thing that I do see with bombs, which makes sense if you don't really think about it, is placing bombs on traps. This isn't really that effective because if a monster just walks onto the trap, instead of doing an attack onto it, then the bombs will not be detonated and someone is going to have to detonate them, which will result in a loss of damage. Another thing people really struggle with is Wakeups. When a monster goes to sleep, the first attack that it gets hit by will deal 2 times damage, so you want to hit the monster with your greatest attack. If a monster falls asleep mid-fight, there's a few ways of knowing this. First off, the music will cut out unless there's another large monster in the area, and the monster will also do a very lengthy animation of lying down. You can also use this sticker when the monster falls asleep to signal to others. When the monster gets procced by sleep, it means that everyone needs to stop attacking, so that you can buff, heal, resharpen, and the person with the biggest wake up hit can do the wake up. I won't really get into wake ups that much, but one thing I do see is people covering the head in bombs, which is somewhat reasonable, but it is ultimately not very smart for a multitude of reasons. First off, let's say I'm using Greatsword and I'm going to wake up the monster. If the monster's head is covered in bombs, then the first hit will be the bombs exploding, not the Greatsword. So the TCS won't get the 2 times damage multiplier, and one of the bombs will. So sometimes, depending on how the bombs are placed, the TCS might not even land in the first place, so you don't even get that damage. Placing all the bombs on top of each other like this so that they get hit after the attack lands on the monster and detonate is much more optimal, and you should try to do this, but no promises with your teammates. Another option, which is arguably better, is to flinch shot the monster. When a monster goes asleep, it will no longer be enraged, so if it's close enough to a wall, you can do 2% of the monster's health by flinch shotting it, and you will also get an opportunity to start wailing on it with the entire party. You can also put bombs on the head of the monster and use either a Rocksteady or Temporal Mantle and clutch claw onto the head and do the flinch shot. The only issue with that is it risks getting the topple from the bombs going off, so some people instead put the bombs where the monster will impact the wall. Monsters have a few forms of stagger, but the one that people don't capitalize on is called Clagger. It looks like this, and when it happens, just clutch claw the monster because it increases their duration. If someone mounts the monster, you should heal, buff, and sharpen, and after that you can either try to hit the monster, or you can just wait for it to get toppled. If you do hit the monster, you can topple it early, which sometimes it's a topple like a stun, and those are kind of a waste. What you shouldn't do, and I'm surprised anyone does it, is you shouldn't place traps or flash bang the monster while it's in the air. This will be a waste of a trap or flash pod. It does happen on accident sometimes, but if you have an ailment like paralysis, sleep, or stun, you should try to not proc it while someone's mounted the monster, but most people, unless they use mods, don't really have a way of knowing how close it is to proccing, so it is understandable if it happens. One thing that is specific to Master Rank is flash pods and traps get reduced use if you use them multiple times per hunt. Flash pods will lose effectiveness, as shown here, if you use them too close together, but if you use them far enough apart, it won't matter. Traps will also see decreased durations upon repeated use as well, so try not to flash monsters when they're on the ground if they can fly. One other thing is you can actually flash monsters out of the air if you shoot bright moss in their face. After testing, I can say it's a little bit of a pain to do, but it doesn't see the same decrease in effectiveness as flash pods do. It also requires 2 bright moss in the face in Master Rank. I am going to talk about Palico gadgets because it applies to duos. I don't really care much about most of the gadgets. The only 2 that are especially effective or less effective are the Choral Orchestra and the Flash Fly Cage. The Choral Orchestra is just like having a hunting horn player that has access to more buffs in the squad, whereas the Flash Fly Cage can waste shock traps and flash pods in Master Rank, and that's why I don't really like using it. Like armor, it doesn't really matter too much what weapon you use on your Palico, although the best 2 would probably be either the Kitty of the Valley Rod, which has the highest paralysis value, or the Bond Ball, which has the highest sleep value. Certain items can be used to buff your squad's attack and defense. Demon Powder gives 10 extra damage and lasts for 3 minutes. Hard Shell Powder gives you 20 extra defense and lasts 3 minutes as well. The Affinity Booster gives you 50% affinity, and the effect persists for 20 seconds after stepping out of the buff area. Your healing items are your Dust of Life, which heals 60 health, your Life Powder, which heals 35 health, and your Herbal Powder, which cleanses poison and heals 20 health. Your Health and Cleanser Booster also fall into this category, and they're pretty self-explanatory.